I need it after having both the hilts rammed into his face, being kicked in the small of the back, and having both sides of his neck cut at once, Carl still coming at me. I think I'm going to throw the sword away and run. Clearly this man is indestructible. So you get the idea. Everybody can ask a dozen different fight masters about that, and they probably have a slightly different idea. We'll never know who's right until we invent a time machine to go back and ask Hans Talbot. And even then, of course, he won't tell us, because he's not stupid. So what we'll do now is we are going to run through the first section of the fight that we showed you. Note that we're fighting in a combat ring. Now, this is not just something we dreamt up for the museum to keep you safe, although it does that. They were used in the medieval period for that same reason. You'll also notice it's about the same size as a modern boxing ring, and presumably for the same reason. You've only got so much room to manoeuvre before you better come back on the attack, or risk being beaten down against the barriers. And these were used for two different kinds of combat: the trial by combat, which was a legal fight to the death, last man standing won his case. The second was the tournament fight, the sporting fight, where you weren't actually trying to hurt anyone. And what we're going to assume is that this is a sporting fight. All Carl and I are trying to do is to lay a blow on so that we can show that it could have been fatal or it could have injured seriously if we carried it through. It's a way of us testing our technique. So, since there's only two of us in this small space, we're probably going to take a guard position. So, Carl, what's your guard?
Okay, from the German fight manual for textbooks, I'm going to take up what's known as the Fool's Guard. Yes, the Fool's Guard. Why the Fool's Guard? Because my sword is pointed down low towards the ground. It's actually not very threatening. Equally, I've left a lot of my upper body open and exposed. Attack.
You fool.
Some might call me a fool. However, if they have not read the same manual as I have, this might happen. And that would make them the fool.
Alright. So I'm going to take up a different guard from a different manual. An Italian manual this time. There was around about the same period, the Great Revolt of the 1400s, called Postulatorum, Flower of Battle, and it shows this guard.
Battery level is 50%.
Now here's the interesting thing, the woman's guard. When we know, certainly believe we know, there's no great amount of evidence for women being taught to fight, at least with swords, in the Middle Ages. There are a few isolated incidents, like Joan of Arc, may have had some sword training, but generally speaking, women didn't fight. So, why would a high-profile fight master, in his manual, call this guard the woman's guard? And I will explain, I'll say to the women in the audience, please don't take offence, because remember this was written in the Middle Ages, and we're now in the early 21st century. And he said it's called the woman's guard because it was an open and inviting stance with the breast held up. So what I'm really saying is, come on, Carl, come and get me. But if Carl does, all I've got to do is step out of line and strike him. No matter what attack he comes in with, I'm out of the way, he walks on to me. So both of us now are trying to get the other one to attack first. If one of us doesn't break the deadlock, then we'll all be here all afternoon. I know we're quite interesting to watch, but I know we're not that interesting to watch. So, I will break the deadlock by making an attack. I ain't going to step forwards, I'm going to step around, hopefully to miss the blade. I'm not going to aim in the high line either, I'm going to aim low. If I aim in the high line, you can bring that sword up and strike me. The target is going to be the knee area. If I can get round far enough, I'd like to cut the hamstring, because that will put him out of the fight for good naught when they're really walking in the right fight. If I can't do that, I want to at least smash or fracture the kneecap. If I can do that, at least for the rest of this fight, he's at a disadvantage.
When I step back, crossing my hands over, this actually allows me to turn the fence very swiftly into my own attack. Wielding the blade over my head, we're going for Keith's leg instead.
I step back, flip the blade aside, raise the sword to the high line. Now I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. I'm going to strike straight down, trying to split the skull down to the eye.
And I take up what's known as a sloping parry, basically sloping the blade down to stop it from getting chipped, keeping it nice and sharp. Through this gap, I can still see my opponent, and it means I know what I'm going to do next. Try and take their head from their shoulders.
I'm going to step back, block, and as I block, I'm already tilting the blade, preparing to do what's called a winding action, pushing his blade out of the way as I jam mine forwards and into his face. Now that's a very, very good move to execute if you can get the timing right. Of course, the big problem is the timing and distance won't always be right. So what happens if I'm just slightly out of balance? Well, I can still do the winding action, but this time as I come in, then Carl's friend simply lift the sword, and that cuts off my attack. But I may have intended to do that so that I can deceive him, come under the blade, and strike him on the hip. Whatever. If we tried that winding action at speed several times a week and we got it wrong, then Carl could get a very nasty injury. So there are times when we have to fake things slightly and put a bit of Hollywood in rather than reality. So what we're going to do with this is, as the cut comes round, all you'll actually see me doing is slipping the blade up in the air and then going for the hit cut.
I lean back, changing my grip on the blade. It's into what's called a half swording technique, giving more direction on where the point is going to go, so I can go for his right eyeball.
You can try.
Didn't work, so I'll look back and go for the other one.
You can try. And the good thing now is, you see, that second thrust, that Carl has overextended himself. So, with a little bit of friction on the blade to throw it aside, I'm able to thrust into an area that I will euphemistically call the family jewels.
Stepping back, beating the sword aside, you can see defensive attack already, coming straight down from my opponent's head.
Step out of the way, take my own sloping parry, and then from here, whip the blade round and try and cut the neck.
And I defend with the strongest part, the force of the blade. And here I can do a number of things. Maybe grab my opponent's blade and try and pull it off him. Or, as you saw in the fight, clamp down with my sword and bring it up to win the first round.
Alright. Well, it was 2-0 at the end of the last 2 rounds. What we'll do is we'll run another couple of rounds. And in fact, we are going to repeat quite a few of the moves from the first fight. But the way we're going to challenge ourselves is to ask ourselves to change the fight at some point with a different movement. Because obviously, if there's one change in the fight, that can change the whole outcome. I'm rather looking at changing the outcome so that I can level up to 2-2, and then we'll see where we go from there. And it all depends on what kind of day it's going to be. Nice. Alright. Good, I like that reverse slope though. That'll be a nice surprise. Yeah. Yay! Lovely. That's 2-all. That's what I want it to be. So 2-all, you have to have a tiebreaker. Yeah? So what we'll do is we'll put it in your hands as the audience. Whoever wins this final round, would you like to see them win heroically, or would you like to see them completely and utterly humiliated? Hands up for heroic. Hands up for humiliation. You'd have done fine watching gladiator games in ancient Rome. Right then, go. Hey! How's that for humiliation? Pretty good. I think it works. Okay, there we go. A brief introduction to the techniques of the two-handed sword, as practiced in the late Middle Ages. Myself and Carl will be around for a few minutes now if you want to ask us any questions or take a closer look at the weapons. All we'll say is, when you handle the weapons, some of you will find them lighter than you expect, some of you will find them heavier than you expect, and obviously the younger members of the audience will certainly find them heavy, so let's have a bit of adult supervision there. Keep the swords pointed up or over the safety barrier towards us, and don't, whatever you do, turn all the way around in your enthusiasm saying, wow, take a look at this! Because otherwise maybe someone will be taking a look at anything for several minutes and we wouldn't want that. Otherwise, hope you have a splendid day. Enjoy the remainder of it. Thanks very much.